السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أخواني وأخواتي الأعزاء، ضيوفنا الكرام، أرحب بكم جميعاً في جلسة جديدة ونقاش شيق على منصة صالون الملتقى الأدبي الافتراضية وبالتعاون مع دار سوثبيز المزادات. حوار اليوم مليئاً بالجمال والفخامة والبريق والسحر، نتحدث فيه عن المجوهرات وتاريخها وصياغتها وإبداع وجمال تصاميمها. يخبرنا التاريخ أننا عرفنا التزين والتجمل قبل معرفتنا بالملبس والمسكن، فصنعنا الأساور والعقود من أنياب الحيوانات والأسماك والأصداف لتظهر قوتنا ومقدراتنا الخارقة كالسحر والقوة، وتمنحنا الجمال الذي ننشد كما استخدمناها كعملات في تجارتنا. ثم ازدهرت صناعة المجوهرات وأصبحت رسالة للجمال والحب والعشق، تزين أعناق النساء وأيديهن ورؤوسهن، وارتبطت بصورة أكبر في حياة المصمم أو من يشتريها، فأصبحت تتمتع بوزن مفاهيمي يحولها من عملة ورمز سطحي للمكانة الاجتماعية إلى قطعة فنية تحرك المشاعر. لهذا يولي العديد من المصممين الفكرة والموضوع والرابط العاطفي أهمية كبرى عندما يبتكرون تصاميم مجوهراتهم. رحلتنا اليوم غالية الثمن، وهذا التكاليف تأخذ الألباب والأنفاس بجمالها وتثبت لنا كم كانت وما زالت المجوهرات هي الصديق الأقرب لقلوب النساء. ننتقل بين بريق الألماس والزمرد والياقوت، فما بين قمر جوزفين الأزرق والنجمة الوردية وبرش الطاووس يطل الألماس شامخاً كسيد الأحجار الكريمة، متربعاً على تيجان الأباطرة والملوك والملكات وأعناق الجميلات. نتحدث اليوم عن قصص وتصاميم أشهر المجوهرات التي ارتدتها ماري أنطوانيت والملكة نازلي وجاكلين كندي وإليزابيث تيلر ومارلين مورو ومس سيمسون وغيرهم من النساء اللاتي ما زال التاريخ يشهد لهن بذوق فريد في ارتداء قطع نادرة ذات تصميم يأخذ الأنفاس. أخواتي وأخواني الأعزاء، أرحب بكم وبدار سوثبي وبضيفتنا لهذه الأمسية الآنسة مي الديب، مستشارة الفن الحديث والمعاصر العربي والإيراني، والسيدة صوفي ستيفنز، متخصصة في المجوهرات. مرحبا بكم وأهلا وسهلا بكم بصالون الملتقى الأدبي في عالمنا الافتراضي. تفضلي نادية، المنصة لك.
مساء الخير جميعا. Good evening everyone. Good evening Miss Sophie. I will make a short introduction of you in Arabic. Hope you don't mind. صوفي ستيفنز أكملت صوفي شهادتها الجامعية في اللاهوت والدراسات الدينية في جامعة بريستول. صوفي عالمة أحجار كريمة ومصنفة ألماس معتمدة لدى جمعية الأحجار الكريمة في بريطانيا. انضمت إلى مجموعة دار سوثبي كأخصائية مجوهرات في منطقة الشرق الأوسط وشمال أفريقيا عام 2019، بعد أن كانت تقدم استشارات للشركة في دبي منذ عام 2016، وتشغل حالياً منصب نائب المدير لمكتب دبي. تتنقل صوفي في أرجاء المنطقة لتقديم المشورة للعملاء بشأن شراء وبيع المجوهرات من خلال مزادات سوثبيز الدولية والمبيعات الخاصة، وتشارك في المعارض الإقليمية والفعاليات التعليمية. إبان ذلك عملت كأخصائية مجوهرات مع دار مزادات دولية أخرى في لندن، كما وعملت سابقاً في تجارة المجوهرات والأحجار الكريمة الأثرية. تساهم صوفي ستيفنز بانتظام في مطبوعات هاربرز بازار أرابيا فيما يختص بالساعات والمجوهرات وفي المنشورات الأخرى. انطلقت أغنية الجاز Diamonds Are Girls Best Friend المرة الأولى عام 49، ولكن ربما اشتهرت أكثر عندما أدتها مارلين مونرو عام 53 في أحد أفلامها. وفي عام 71 أدت المبهرة شيرلي باسي أغنية Diamonds Are Forever في فيلم السير شون كونري الأسطوري. ومع بحر الخلود وباسم السيدة أسماء صديق مطوع، مؤسسة ورئيسة صالون الملتقى الأدبي، يسعدنا أن نرحب بالسيدة صوفي ستيفنز، طبعاً بالأخت مي، في علاقة الحب الأبدية مع عالم الساعات والمجوهرات. أهلاً وسهلاً.
أهلاً وسهلاً بيكم، وميرسي جداً للطرح لنا الفرصة إن احنا تاني نتكلم معاكم ونبقى معاكم على الشاشة. I know Sophie and I both are very excited to be with الملتقى today, and we're so grateful. I'm so excited that Sophie will be talking with everyone, كل حد جميعاً عن jewelry with the history of jewelry. So if you just bear with me, and I'm going to share screen now, and I hand it over to Sophie, who is my colleague في jewelry. I'll be interjecting في النص عشان أتكلم، هعمل شوية ترجمة باللغة العربية وكمان شوية توضيح بالعربي وأسئلة بيني وبين Sophie. Sophie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mai. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us this evening. We're really looking forward to it. So this evening, we're going to be discussing the 5 key influences on jewellery from approximately the last 100 to 150 years. And if we go to the next slide, we can see what those 5 key influences are going to be. So the important thing to note, so there's 5 of them here. It's the power of provenance, meaning looking at the famous owners and collectors of these wonderful jewels, looking at the diamonds and the coloured gemstones that they were set with, looking at the role that international travel played, influencing design, influencing inspiration, and then lastly, looking at the role of the great jewellery houses in jewellery design, so brands such as Cartier, Van Cleef, and looking at their historical collections. But I think the important thing to notice is that they're not going to be, neatly segmented, so they overlap with one another. So for example, if we talk about provenance, people who own them, many of the pieces were made by the jewellery houses and obviously set with some truly fabulous diamonds and gems. So if we start with the power of provenance. So what do we mean by provenance? So many of the jewels that we will see in the session today were owned by members of royalty, style icons, and important jewellery collectors. And when we're lucky enough to find and offer such pieces for auction at Sotheby's, and we know this history, we know who owned the jewels, this can have an enormous impact on value. And this was very much demonstrated by the Duchess of Windsor sale, which was held, we sold her jewellery for the first time in Geneva in 1987, followed by possessions of the Duke and Duchess in New York in 1997, and then some of her jewellery was re-offered in London at Sotheby's in 2010. And this really kick-started the notion of major provenance auctions, and this was due to the enormous amount of publicity it received and the final results. So the 1987 sale had 306 lots in total being offered. We were expecting it to make about $10 million, and actually more than quadrupled that into just over $46 million in total. So who was the Duchess of Windsor? So why did the sale create such a fuss? So she was an American lady, more commonly known as Mrs. Wallis Simpson, and she was already once divorced and nearly twice divorced from her second husband when she met the then Prince of Wales, who went on to become King Edward VIII of England in January 1936. And they fell very much in love. And unfortunately, they were unable to marry while Edward was king. The British establishment very much looked down on her marital track record, and instead he chose to abdicate his throne in December 1936. So he reigned for not even a year. And then he married her in 1937, and they remained married until his death, which was 35 years later. And he remained very much in love with her right up until the day he died. And he showered her with some of the most wonderful jewellery and gemstones throughout their relationship. It was an amazing collection. It signified a very passionate love affair, with many of the pieces inscribed with personal messages between the couple. So for example, there was a lovely Van Cleef ruby and diamond bracelet, and it was given by the Duke to the Duchess, or when he was king, gave it to Mrs. Simpson in March 1936. And it was just inscribed with a message saying, "Hold tight," meaning, have patience, keep waiting. We will get there one day. Now, shortly before his death, the Duke expressed his wish for all of the jewels to be broken up, so the stones sold so that no other woman could wear them. But fortunately for us, this request was not obeyed. And a year after the Duchess's death, on April the 2nd and 3rd in 1987, her astonishing collection was offered for auction at Sotheby's, Geneva. And you can see it was a real media sensation, as you can see from all these wonderful headlines here. So, there was really everything you could want from a great provenance sale. There was a famous royal couple, there was a love affair signifying a key moment in history, and of course we have the jewels themselves, wonderful designs signed by some of the leading jewellery houses. So we're going to look at a few of those pieces, the signed pieces. So in the next slide, we have the Cartier bracelet.
Like one of the things, حاجة المهمة, I'm just gonna jump in. أهم حاجة كان في مقتنيات Duchess of Windsor، غير إنه هي حاجات مهمة وحاجات قيمة وكده، كان فكرة إن هي كانت مقتنيات الخاصة لل Duchess of Windsor. That the provenance of the Duchess of Windsor added a whole different dimension to the sale of these things. had these things زي ما صوفي قالت كانت بتاعت أي مقتني خاص، احنا كنا حاطين estimate 10 مليون فرنك. But 10 million was an estimate. You probably sometimes get 10-15% more of the estimate or within the estimate. But never do quadruple. And this is definitely owed زي ما صوفي قالت للprovenance للتاريخ إنه هو كان حاجات ومقتنيات الخاصة of the Duchess of Windsor. Off to you for this beautiful bangle bracelet.
Oh yeah, so the lovely bracelet. So this was one of the Duchess's favourite pieces. So she was often photographed wearing it. You can see it just about on her left wrist in this photograph by Cecil Beaton in the bottom right corner. So this was set with 9 gem set crosses by Cartier, and each one on the reverse was inscribed with a personal message between the couple. And they commemorated key moments of the relationship. So their wedding day, for example, an attempted assassination on the Duke. And yes, and it ranges in date. Obviously, the cross has been given between 1934 and 1944. And then looking as well at some other key pieces by Cartier. So this one on the left, this wonderful panther bracelet by Cartier, Paris from 1952. So today you're probably all familiar with the Panthère collection by Cartier, extremely famous, but the Duke and the Duchess were actually the first clients to commission these jewels in 3-dimensional form from the jewelry house. And they originally commissioned a golden emerald tiger brooch. It was lovely. It was a yellow gold tiger sitting on top one of the emeralds from the Duke's own collection. It weighed about 100 carats. And he gifted it to the Duchess, who received it, but then kindly let him know that she actually preferred sapphires. So the following year, she bought another brooch from Cartier, this time featuring a platinum panther studded with diamonds. And this one was crouching on top of a 152-carat sapphire, which was also in the 1987 sale. But in 1952, she ordered this bracelet, and it's really quite spectacular, as you can see, very lifelike with the prowling design, and it's fully articulated and curved around the wrist, as you can see her wearing it in the bottom left here.
And I think what's interesting to note, Sophie, is that we've managed to sell it twice so far, in 1987 and both in 2010. يعني احنا بعناها مرتين. And the difference between the price achieved in both times.
Yeah, exactly. So in 1987, it achieved just over 2 million. And in 2010, the buyer in 1987 decided it was a good time to reoffer. There'd been a large amount of time between the sales, reoffered it in 2010 and made just over $7 million. So not a bad return on the original purchase. And the same pretty much with this flamingo brooch on the right. So this is Cartier Paris in 1940. And actually Cartier have recorded in their archives that the Duchess she used 4 bracelets and a necklace of her own. She used the gems within that, or Cartier used the gems within that to make up this flamingo brooch. And it's a lovely early example of the more naturalistic style or more stylized jewels that Cartier started doing throughout the 1940s. It's a bit difficult to see here because it's obviously presented flat, but actually the plumes and the feathers, the gemstones on there are slightly raised and curved. So it's a more realistic design. And again, in 2010, that did very well as well.
And Sophie, just to ask you, and we believe that also the power of provenance also was able to maintain from the 87 sale to the 2010 sale, or is it also because the prices have changed or the market has changed? Is it a lot of it rooted to the provenance as well?
I think it's definitely a combination of both. These are rare pieces by Cartier. They're one-off designs, but certainly the provenance would have stayed and probably become, awareness grew about the Duchess of Windsor jewels thanks to the 1987 sale, and that sold. And it's exciting because there was enough time between the sales to really generate that interest and keep it going. So it was, certainly down to the provenance in the 2010 sale as well.
And my last question is that they were big Cartier, loyal to Cartier, or were they?
No, they were clients actually of a number of jewelry houses, Van Cleef as well. And actually, interestingly, the Duchess was the client of a jewelry designer called Suzanne Belperon. And she was French, based in Paris, but she never signed her work. She was extremely discreet. Her saying was, "My style is my signature. If you know my pieces, you know." And it was actually thanks to the Duchess of Windsor sale in 1987 that the whole market became more aware of Belperon pieces. And interestingly, after that is when we saw popularity for Belperon pieces soar in the auction market. So she was very much a patron of many jewelry houses and individual designers as well.
What's very interesting in Nahna, we can also see how provenance and how patrons ممكن يخلوا jewelry houses يطلعوا, how patrons can actually lift a jewelry house, and this is something we see over and over again, and with the example of the Duchess of Windsor and Belle Perron.
Yes. And I think it's important to note as well, you know, these pieces are very important, not only for private collectors. So we cannot say, for example, who the Panther bracelet sold to, but Cartier themselves actually bought back the flamingo brooch. So they've got it now in their heritage collection. So you can, when they choose to exhibit it at various locations around the world, it can actually still be seen, which is lovely.
واحنا شايفين انه كتير من the houses like Cartier, like Van Cleef, like Piaget are trying to buy back their very historical pieces to keep them in their heritage collection. It's something we're seeing these houses, Bulgari as well, to try to do عشان to codify their history. إن هم بس not only عايزين يخلوا ال drawings, the history of the piece, but they also want to re-own the piece, مش بس عشان أهمية ال piece, but the provenance that the piece has. So that's why provenance is so important.
So moving on to other provenance auctions, another great example is very recent, and this was in November 2018, and Sotheby's offered a collection of jewels from the Bourbon-Parma collection. So the Bourbon-Parmas, they were one of the most important European royal dynasties, and they originally descended from Louis XVI of France and spanned hundreds of years across families, including the Habsburgs and the Parmas. And many of these jewels actually came to Sotheby's Dubai. We did an exhibition at the gallery the month before the auction took place. A number of the pieces included beautiful natural pearls. I'm sure everyone here is very familiar with the Gulf's history with natural pearls. So we thought it was a nice touch to bring them here before they found their next homes. Now, 10 of the jewels from the Bourbon-Parma collection actually belong to Queen Marie Antoinette, so wife of Louis XVI and famously the doomed last Queen of France. And so these had a brilliant history. They're not only owned by her, but they actually played a role in her final days. And this was in 1791. The King Louis, Marie Antoinette, and their two children began preparing for their escape from France. According to accounts written by Marie Antoinette's lady-in-waiting, she spent an entire evening in the palace wrapping up all of her diamonds, rubies, and pearls, placing them in cotton and putting them into a wooden chest. And in the following day, she sent this chest containing her jewels to Brussels and then on to Vienna, where they were kept in the safekeeping of her nephew. But unfortunately, as we know, they were imprisoned the following year in the tower, the Temple Tower, and as we know, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette were then executed by the guillotine the following year. And their son Louis, sadly, he was only 10 years old, he died in captivity. And so the King and Queen only had one surviving child, Marie-Thérèse de France, also known as Madame Royale. And she was released after 3 years of solitary confinement in 1795. So she came out, she learned about the deaths of her parents and of her brother, and she was sent on to Austria, and on her arrival in Vienna, she was given by her cousin, the Emperor, her mother's jewels. Unfortunately, she never had children of her own, but she actually passed them on next to her adopted daughter and her niece, Louise of France, and from there they passed down into the family and became what known as the modern-day Bourbon-Parma family. So included in these jewels, on the right we have this lovely portrait miniature diamond ring made in the late 18th century, and Marie-Thérèse, Marie Antoinette's daughter, actually mentions this. She says it's set within a frame of diamonds and in a likeness of her mother. And as going back to Mai's point as well, with the impact of provenance on the value, you can see the difficulty sometimes estimating what these pieces are going to sell for. We put an estimate on here of $8,000 to $12,000, and it vastly exceeded this. Same here on the left with this natural pearl and diamond necklace, also belonging to Queen Marie Antoinette. This was originally part of a 3-row necklace that she wore, and again achieved multiple times its estimate. So 40 to 70,000, made more than 10 times its low estimate at 447,000.
Sophie, Anna, I just want to ask, because I know we discussed this about the pearls.
Yeah.
Because these are natural pearls, and I know in the Gulf there's a huge appreciation for natural pearls. So why these pearls and what makes them special?
Well, exactly. We can very much thank the Gulf for many of the vast majority of beautiful natural pearls that we see here. I mean, natural pearls, they're a bit of an accident, basically. So the way that they're formed, to describe it very briefly, is that they're formed in a mollusk or an oyster. And the mollusk or the oyster opens up to feed, and an irritant enters it. So this can be a small piece of shell, it can be a little animal. And the oyster defends itself. So it releases this mother of pearl, or what we call nacre, in layers, and it encloses the irritant. And over time, it secretes more and more of these layers and covers up this piece of shell or whatever it may be. And this is the pearl. It ends up being a pearl. But they're incredibly rare, firstly, because this doesn't happen in all oysters. They're very difficult to find. So traditionally, divers used to free dive to go and try and find pearls, and they would go down, without any mask or any real protective gear, sometimes down to feet of about 60 feet in depth. And they could spend all day, bringing up these oysters, taking them to the ship, opening them up, and nothing's in there. And even if you're lucky enough to find a pearl, it might be very small, it might be quite misshapen. So to find one, beautiful circular pearl, such as one of these in the necklace, is brilliant. To find, I think it's 39 of them in this necklace, all very well matched in size. They're all about 7 to 9 millimeters in diameter, all perfectly matched in terms of color and quality. That is exceptionally rare. So intrinsically, natural pearls have a lot of value. Add in the provenance, and you've got a very, very valuable piece of jewelry indeed.
زي في المثل اللي صوفي طرحته هنا، احنا بنشوف الناتشورال بيرلز اللي هو اللولي الطبيعي ده هو definitely فيه تاريخ عريق مع الخليج. وبس هنا لما نحط برضو الناتشورال بيرل مع فكرة انه البروفنانس بتاع ماري أنطوانيت it's a whole different facet. يعني the price we had put in was 40 to 70,000 and the price achieved was 447,000. It's really a huge, I don't think, Sophie, like you said, anyone would have expected this big jump in terms of a delivery on this price achieved. And that's given as courtesy of the provenance that it belonged to Marie Antoinette, because if it was just a regular natural pearl necklace, it could have made maybe 80, 100,000, but the 400,000 just adds a whole different facet of the provenance.
It's the history for sure.
It's التاريخ بيلعب دور مهم جدا للمقتنيات الجولري.
Yeah.
And we have another example from the Bourbon Parma family, right?
So this was everything that we've just said is summarized and exemplified by Marie Antoinette's natural pearl and diamond pendant from the 18th century. So this, talking about natural pearls, this natural pearl had enormous intrinsic value in itself. It was huge. It was about 25 millimeters by 18 millimeters. So you can imagine that kind of sitting in the palm of your hand. So we thought, a valuable natural pearl, it has the Marie Antoinette factor, we'll put on an estimate of $1 to $2 million. And it exceeded all of our expectations by making over $36 million on the day. And that is the world record for a natural pearl selling at auction. So we wanted to include this example because this was actually, so this is really showing the power of provenance. Because obviously with Marie Antoinette's pearl, as we said, it had intrinsic value on its own. This was Jacqueline Kennedy's necklace. So Sotheby's New York sold her collection or her estate in 1996, and it included this. But these aren't natural pearls. These aren't even cultured pearls. These are imitations. So they're literally bits of plastic coated with a material to make them look like pearls, and the clasp is made of crystal. And so we thought, retail value for a piece like this, you might be looking at $60. And we recognised that it was it was featured in this lovely photograph from 1962 of Jackie Kennedy with her son, John Jr., a very sweet photo. So we thought that, added a bit of interest. So let's be punchy with the estimate and put on $500 to $700. Any guesses for how much it might have made, Mai?
I can cheat because I actually know, but this is actually, I think, so incredible because it's unbelievable. Like you would assume from 500 to 7, it's plastic. You can go get another one like from the store for $150. But because of the Jackie O story and because of the Jackie O was wearing it, it was يعني تضخم السعر بطريقة رهيبة. يعني من 500 ل 700 الحاجة اللي ممكن كانت تسوى 200 وحطيتي عليها premium ب 500 عشان Jackie O, and the price achieved. And Sophie, when she showed me this yesterday, I was shocked.
We had one guess. We've had one guess from
I
Tanya, which said $150,000.
Well, it achieved, Sophie, 200.
Yeah. Not a bad guess, Tanya.
Very good guess. It achieved $211,500.
Yes, which was
With that, just to reiterate, ده مش natural pearls, these are plastic pearls. They're not even cultured pearls. This is really nothing of great value.
But they belong to Jacqueline Kennedy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I have to say as well that the buyer of the piece, this is actually a retailer called Franklin Mint, and they, because they bought the Jackie necklace, they were able to trademark the design and the name. So they've actually made replicas of this necklace. They were able to. So I think they have more than made their money back.
And you could have bought the Jackie O necklace from Franklin Minter for a couple of $100 probably.
Okay. But would it have been worn by Jackie?
No. And I don't think the one worn by Jackie probably is still with them.
That's true. Be interesting to know. Okay, great. So we're going on to diamonds next. So we're going to look at the role that diamonds and gems have played in many of the jewels featured today. And so firstly, looking at diamonds, the king of gems, and looking at how the supply and new discoveries of them over the last 150 years very much impacted jewelry design. So diamonds have been admired and used in jewelry for millennia. And why was this? Part of the reason was, their perceived magical powers. Historically, they're believed to protect wearers due to their strength and durability. But another major reason was their early rarity. So today they're mined from all over the world. They come from Africa, they come from Canada, Russia, Australia. But until 1725, the only known source of diamonds in the world was India. And very little is known of the early diamond mining days, we believe to have started in around 400 BC. Now, particularly famous in India was a region called Golconda. And this was known for producing some of the finest diamonds in the world and many of the most famous. So examples such as the Koh-i-Noor and the Blue Hope diamond, these would all have originated from the Golconda region. And a reason why they're often very highly prized for their beauty. In the gemological world, we call them type 2A. And this refers to a diamond's purity and freedom from nitrogen. So if you go into a jewelry store now and you look at all of the diamond rings, for example, they have set out, you might notice that a lot of them draw, varying degrees of a yellow color. And this is thanks to nitrogen in their crystal structure. But type 2A diamonds, such as the ones that can come from Golconda, are free from this. So they're either exceptionally white or found with a brown, pink or blue tone. But the reason why they're really highly prized, it's quite hard to describe, but they have this almost, it's a great transparency, almost liquidity about them. They look like very clear water. If you hold one in your hands, like an old Golconda stone, you can really see this. It's kind of luminous almost. And so,
are the Golconda mines now depleted, or do we still manage to get things from the Golconda?
Pretty much. So their peak of production was in about the 1600s. And we just don't really hear about them anymore. And they've been majorly surpassed, by the other major producers, Africa, Canada, Australia. We don't really hear about it anymore. Their heyday though was in the 1600s.
So these Golconda diamonds, sorry Sophie, are the rarest and probably were the most sought after diamonds at one point in history.
Yeah, well, they were the only place. There was a very brief discovery in Borneo, I think, but they were, India was the major producer, and Golconda, they were just known or famed for producing exceptionally beautiful stones as well because of the type of diamonds that were produced from there, or were found from there. So examples of these, of gold stones that would have come from the Golconda mines, are such as the Beau Sancy. This drew a brown tint and came up for auction in 2012. And so obviously the bonus of these wonderful stones is they come with fascinating histories such as this. So the diamond's owner was first Marie de Medici. She came from the Medici family, the Italian political dynasty. And she was the richest heiress in Europe and married to Francis Henry IV in 1600. And jewelry was undoubtedly her passion. She inherited this from her gemstone connoisseur father, Francesco. And he taught her that diamond, no other precious stone was as majestic as diamond. So the beautiful colours of emerald, rubies and sapphires cannot be seen from afar, but because of the diamond's brilliance, it really makes the wearer stand out in the crowd and commands rank and respect. And so with this in mind, Marie de Medici, she set about acquiring two of the then largest diamonds in the world, the Sancy and the Beau Sancy, weighing 55 and 34 carats respectively. And Marie was furious when she lost out on the Sancy in 1604. This was snapped up by James I of England to wear in his hat. And therefore she hastily bought the Beau Sancy and ensured it was on full view for her coronation in 1610. And it was mounted at the top of her pearl and diamond crown. Unfortunately, the glory wasn't to last very long. The next day her husband was assassinated. And she was Queen Regent, looking after her 9-year-old son, Louis, who was then king, but she had a very difficult time controlling the religious and the political problems, and she quarrelled with her son as he became older. So she actually went into exile in 1630 and ended up settling in Cologne, and she fell into dire financial problems. So she actually ended up, a pawnbroker took the Beau Sancy. She was unable to redeem her pledge, and after that it passed through various owners, but it ended up in the Prussian crown jewels. And then obviously appeared for auction at Sotheby's, where it made over $9 million.
I want to say the Beau Sancy has both elements, both elements, the provenance and the diamond. It's not only في اتنين عائد اللي هو انه الالماس was so beautiful and so rare, and the story of it, وانه كمان كان قطعة من قطع عائلة ميديتشي, one of the most important European families during the Renaissance era. And the Farnese family is also something like the Medicis, which we're going to touch upon. The same kind of family in Europe were the Farneses, and then Sophie's going to take us through this.
Exactly. So the Farnese blue, so this belonged to Elizabeth Farnese, and she was actually Italian. She was born in Parma in 1692, but she later became the Queen of Spain through her marriage to Philip V. And it was actually her third son who founded the modern-day House of Bourbon-Parma. So this diamond passed through 4 of the most important royal families in Europe, so Spain, France, Italy and Austria, and witnessed over 300 years of European history, travelling across the continent. But all of the time it was kept in a casket and nobody knew about it except a few close relatives and of course the family jewellers. So pretty much unknown about until it appeared for auction at Sotheby's in 2018. But how did it come to be in Elizabeth Farnese's possession? So blue has often been identified as the colour of kings, and in the 17th and 18th centuries in particular, it was viewed as the ultimate royal gift. And so this blue diamond was given to Elizabeth Farnese upon her marriage to Philip. But at the time, the Spanish finances were in a bit of, a dire problem. They had long years of war, there wasn't much going on, they had an awful lot of debt. So they had to provide a dowry for this new queen. So the Spanish government sent word to the governors of all the Spanish colonies in the East and West and ordered them to send wedding gifts to Madrid. And it took a year to assemble all of the various treasures that would go to this new Spanish bride. So in August 1715, the Golden Fleet sailed from Cuba, and this was 12 ships, and they were carrying gold bullion, they were carrying an enormous amount of emeralds. But disaster struck, so 10 days after they set sail, a hurricane hit the fleet, and all but one boat was sunk off the Gulf of Florida, including the ship with all of the emeralds. But one diamond made its way to Spain, which was this pear-shaped blue diamond offered to the new Spanish queen by the governor of the Philippines. Philippines Islands, sorry. And the provenance is actually mentioned on this silver plaque that came with the blue diamond, with the Farnese blue. And it reads in French, translated as remarkable blue brilliant. The historical stone was offered by the Philippine Islands to Elizabeth Farnese, Queen of Spain, wife of Philip V, great-grandfather of the Comte de Villafranca, current owner of that stone.
This piece also, not only does it have the provenance, the story, this tumultuous story, الحكاية اللي هي سافرت ورجعت وكل ده, but also the rarity of blue diamonds, which we still don't come across so frequently.
Yeah. So, yes, so until 1725, India, main producer or the sole producer of the world's diamonds. However, in 1725, gold diggers discovered some diamonds in Brazil. So from then until about 1870, that country became the world's major source of these diamonds. However, in 1866, a 15-year-old boy called Erasmus Jacobs discovered the Eureka diamond in South Africa in the Kimberley region. Apparently he didn't really know what it was. No one figured out what it was for ages. He took it back home. Apparently he gave it to his sister, who put it in her play box. Their mother then made them give it to a neighbor as a bit of a gift. And it was only one of his geologist friends who finally figured out that it was actually a 20-carat diamond. So word of this quickly spread, and this resulted into what we know now as the South African diamond rush. So this started in kind of 1969 kind of time, started in the soft earth, and then eventually, started digging down into the hard rock, the volcanic rock that we call kimberlite. And over the next 15 years, this means that over 95% of the world's diamonds came from the area around Kimberley. But this in turn kind of led to an oversupply. There were too many of them, and it was what we call now the democratization of diamonds. So previously they'd been reserved for royalty and for aristocrats, but now they were readily available, particularly to a newly rich class of Americans who had made their fortune through the railroad and oil industries and finance as well. So an example of this was the Sancy diamond, the 55-carat diamond that we mentioned previously. So this was bought by William Waldorf Astor in 1891. And also the Hope diamond, which was sold by Pierre Cartier. He sold it to Evelyn Walsh McLean. But it also meant that the jewelry houses had more material, more diamonds to work with. They could experiment more, they could experiment with the cutting styles because it wasn't such a rare material anymore. And hence the modern round brilliant that we know today was actually kind of finalized in the 1950s. And
so Sophie, before the 1950s, we really didn't see a lot of these round cuts. يعني the round cut قبل سنة 50 ما كانتش متواجدة عشان ما كانوش عايزين يهدروا في الألماس. Like they didn't want to waste too much of the diamond because, as you said, there wasn't an oversupply as we can see at the turn of the century, which is when the democratization ما كان فيه زيادة من الألماس, that there's now a supply of diamonds.
Exactly. I mean, you had to, you couldn't be as liberal with them. You wanted to keep as much weight as possible, and also the cutting technology wasn't as good. That also developed as well. You did get round stones, but we call them like the European cut, for example, old round European cut. And when you look at them from the side, you see that they've got more weight to the bottom. You might see that the top has a smaller table. So they are known to be different from the modern round brilliant cut, which is cut to extremely exact proportions and angles. I mean, it's very, very exact because you want to get these, not to go too technical, but it's all based upon the total internal reflection of light. So that's why the diamond had to be cut in a very specific way. Otherwise, light leaks out and the diamond looks a little bit more dull. But it's personal preference. I mean, me, for example, I much prefer an old cut. So I think they have more charm and more character. But many people prefer, the kind of icy brilliance of a modern round brilliant. So really up to the individual person and preference. But yes, and so we see these much more kind of, from the 20th century, much more white diamond heavy designs, such as this beautiful tiara by Cartier from the 1930s. And the peak of the tiara's popularity was from the 1870s until just before the First World War. So firstly, due to diamonds being plentiful, but also the fashion was for these wonderful voluminous hairstyles, which suited the tiara very well. And they went out of fashion after the First World War in Europe as well. So in 2015, we sold this. This lovely tiara belonged to Mary, the Duchess of Roxburgh. And she was born into a world of tradition and high society. Her mother was the daughter of a British Prime Minister and a Rothschild heiress, and her father was the Earl of Crewe. So their homes were frequented by very, bright young things and politicians. And she was married in 1935, and as you can see, she made it onto the front page of the Tatler magazine, the society magazine, at the time, wearing a tiara. It's probably worth mentioning as well that it wasn't, just thanks to diamonds that you have these more white designs. You've also got platinum being used much more since the beginning of the 20th century. So platinum, as we know, it's a much stronger metal, so you can use less of it. So it almost kind of phase into invisibility behind the diamonds being used. Before then, if you wanted white jewelry, you'd have to use silver. And because of silver's, it tarnishes on clothes and skin, you'd have to back it with yellow gold. So platinum really kind of opened up this new, light, wonderful, kind of airy pieces of jewelry that we see around this time emerging. And Cartier were very much, the kings of platinum. They are the ones that pioneered its use and worked with it really beautifully. So moving on to the coloured gemstones. So in addition to the diamonds, we also see the use, and we talk about the big three, which is ruby, sapphire, and emerald. And today these are also mined all over the world. So for example, recently we've had lovely rubies emerging from Mozambique since 2009. We've had beautiful emeralds being commercially available from Zambia since the 1970s. But traditionally they came from just a few places in the world that are still renowned today for producing some of the rarest and most beautiful gems. So notably, we're going to talk about today Burmese rubies, Kashmir sapphires, and Colombian emeralds. So for example, looking at the Burmese ruby, in this ruby and diamond, a hair brooch or brooch hair ornament by Bashrouche circa 1900. So you can see here it weighs just under 7 carats. It's Burmese, and it says no indications of heating. So what do we mean by that? So it's an important point to note that actually the vast majority of coloured gemstones on the market today have been treated in some way to improve their colour and their clarity. And there's nothing wrong with this. It can produce some beautiful stones. It's very common, but it should always be properly disclosed to the buyer because it can have an enormous impact on value. So typically you will see this tiny minority of coloured gems that aren't treated in any way typically sell and are worth much more because this is how the earth has made them. They've come up, they've been cut by man, but these are one of nature's most beautiful treasures.
So Sophie, what does when we talk about a pure Burmese ruby, واحدة without any heat, what does that mean? What do we imply with the heat? Because we see Colombia no heat, we see an emerald no heat, a sapphire no heat, and this just like you said, it changes the value. السعر بيختلف تماما اما يكون حاجة ما فيش فيها heat, ما فيش فيها أي إضافات, nothing additional.
Yeah. No, exactly, and it's it just means that the stone has been completely unaffected. So it carries a cachet. You can actually say that this stone is as it is. It came up from the earth. It has been totally unaffected by man apart from the cutting, and it's just a true collector's item for that.
And usually also, we were discussing, you and I, the Burma, they try to say that it's like a pigeon blood color. إنه في أحلى لون Burma اللي هو بيكون دم بتاع مش دم الحمامة. This is like the most common thing. The pigeon blood Burmese ruby is the best kind of ruby that anyone can get to.
Yeah, exactly. So pigeon blood means it refers to this pure, brilliant red that you can get in Burmese rubies. So often you'll see rubies, they look a bit pinkish, they might look a bit purplish, even brown. But with pigeon blood, it's just pure, unaffected red. And it's lovely. And it doesn't, I don't know what they mean by pigeon's blood. I think it's because when you cut a pigeon, apparently the first drops of blood that appeared on a silver dish is this brilliant red that looks similar to the lovely red that you get with these Burmese rubies. And they're saying now as well, apparently Mozambique can produce these rubies as well of a similar kind of pigeon blood colour. But yes, it's the Burmese pigeon blood that really achieve significant prices at auction. And actually, a pigeon blood ruby was the first ruby to make over $1 million per carat at auction. It was a Cartier piece, the Sunrise Ruby. So that was, they can be enormously valuable. Okay, so moving on to sapphires. So these beautiful sapphires here, they belong to Odile de Richelieu, so the Richelieu sapphires. And she was a countess and a princess. She grew up in Monaco after her mother, Alice Hine, married the sovereign prince of Monaco, Albert. And it was understood that these sapphires were given to Odile on her wedding day, on her marriage. And they've actually been remounted twice as pairs of earrings since this date. And again, actually, since we sold these, they've been remounted again by the latest buyer. But these sapphires, as we can see, they come from Kashmir. and the world's finest and most sought over sapphires originate from here. So the supply of Kashmir sapphires was actually discovered by a bit of an accident. It was a landslide that happened between 1879 and 1882 in a very remote region of the Himalayas. And initially, they were beautiful gems, but they were just traded locally for salt and other consumer goods. But in 1882, they started to appear in the markets, and it was here that their popularity grew and their true value was recognized. And so the Maharaja suddenly, stopped all private trading in the mines and took over it himself. But it was still, so really he was very focusing on the mines, on mining in this region, but it was very difficult to do. So the mines themselves were actually in very high altitude and under harsh weather conditions. And this meant that you could only mine for 3 months of the year, from July through to September. But despite this, so between 1883 and 1887, the old mine in Kashmir, this is when we see the major, mining activities and large crystals being found. So this is when you see predominantly Kashmir sapphires weighing 10 carats and over being found. And by 1887, this old mine was exhausted. They opened up a new mine, which was a little bit south, but it didn't really produce the same number or the same quality and the same size of stones. So this was shut in about 1908 as well. So therefore, any Kashmir sapphire that weighs above 10 carats is considered very rare. To find ones that weigh over 20 and are so well matched that they can be worn in a pair of earrings such as this is a real, really, really, truly rare find. And you can see this in the result that it made, $8.3 million over a low estimate of 2.5. But what really elevates Kashmir sapphires over all others is not just this rarity, but it's also their beauty. And the photo doesn't really do it justice, but they have this beautiful, intense blue hue mixed with this kind of velvety tone. And it's often compared to the vibrant blue hue of a cornflower, but they're really quite exceptional when you see them in person.
So زي ما صوفي كانت بتقول، احنا دلوقتي اهم روبيز بنبص عليها هي اللي بتكون موجودة في بيرما، وبعدين بنسمي the most important rubies اللي هما pigeon blood rubies. For sapphires أهم sapphires اللي احنا بنشوفها هي الكاشمير sapphires، وبعدين اللي احنا ممكن نcompare them بنسميهم زي cornflower blue sapphires. وبالذات الراريتي في السافايرز دي المقاس، ان احنا المقاس المتاح ده اللي هو 26 و20 قيراط they no longer exist. We no longer have the mines in Kashmir، ما بيطرحوش خالص المقاس ده، الحجم ده. فان احنا نلاقي اتنين دي حاجه. Let's add also, Sophie, for these the facet of the provenance, it just adds a whole other dimension. فاحنا في السافايرز دي we have برضو the rarity of these Kashmir sapphires اللي احنا مش بنشوف خالص these sapphires anymore being produced from these mines, and the provenance, and that's why you get such a attractive result for it.
Exactly. Yeah. And so moving on to emeralds. So the earliest source of emeralds were actually found in Egypt. So this for you, Mai. So Cleopatra was a fan, apparently, but they've long since disappeared, and apparently they weren't known to be of great quality. And so Colombian emeralds had obviously been mined for centuries by the local population, but it was the Spanish conquest in the 16th century that really resulted in these gems being brought back to Europe. And they were renowned for the deep, lovely bluish green colours, like these 11 emerald drops that you can see in this tiara here. So that's over 500 carats worth of Colombian emeralds here. So this tiara was formerly in the collection of Princess Katharina Henkel von Donnersmarck, which is the Donnersmarcks were one of Germany's oldest noble families. And she received it as a gift from her husband, and it dates to about circa 1910. So the tiara was actually sold for the first time at Sotheby's Zurich in 1979, and then it was reoffered in 2011 when it made the most expensive price for a tiara at auction, which was 12.7 million. And family tradition actually linked these 11 emerald drops to the French imperial crown jewels, because in 1872 records show that there was the sale of Empress Eugenia's private collection of jewels, which included apparently 25 polished emerald drops. So 11 of these could have been later gathered and used for this tiara. And the imperial provenance would have been perfect fit to the grandeur of the commission and the status of the Donnersmarcks. The tiara isn't signed and it doesn't bear any marks, but it actually has since been attributed to Joseph Chaumet, and Chaumet had it as part of their exhibition in Monaco last summer, which was Jewels of Sovereigns since 1780. So it was seen on it could be seen on view there.
And Sophie, for the Colombian emeralds also are the ones we seek the most when it comes to the kind of emeralds, the best kind of emeralds to sort of acquire.
Yeah, exactly. So they're the ones that hold the kudos of Burmese Burmese rubies, Kashmir sapphires, and if you're talking about emeralds, you're talking about Colombian. Again, it's very slightly different with emeralds. So you don't really call it no heat on the laboratory reports that you see, but frequently emeralds are oiled at source. They're taken out of the ground and often oiled straight away. This is very common and actually much more acceptable than other forms of gemstone treatments because it improves the color and the durability of the stones. But similarly, if you've got no oil, minor oil, or significant oil, as it gets more and more, the impact gets, the value gets affected. So all of these were Colombian minor oil.
And also, the emeralds, if I recall correctly, they're very fragile stones usually.
They're hard. You cannot scratch them very easily, but they're brittle, so they can break. So for example, when you talk about the emerald cut, where you kind of have this shape and the corners are cut off. This was traditionally done because if you wore an emerald on a ring and you banged it, the corners would often fly off from the force. So that's why it's cut like that to prevent that from happening. So they can break easily, but they cannot scratch.
Thank you, Sophie.
That's okay.
More on emeralds here.
More on emeralds. So we're going to use emeralds to move on to the fourth theme, which is international travel. So the trade route, so by the end of the 16th century, we start seeing an awful lot of emeralds coming into Europe, but through India. They were absolutely adored by the Indian Maharajas. So the emeralds in the Donner's Mark tiara, for example, would actually have originally been drilled and polished in India, probably during the 17th and 18th centuries, and would have adorned the neck of the Maharaja before going up into Europe. So in 1911, Jacques Cartier, he was the youngest of the Cartier brothers, he first traveled to India, and it was kind of a dual purpose trip. So he wanted to meet new Indian clients for the Cartier firm, and he also wanted to cut out some of the middlemen in the gemstone and pearl trade. So he wanted to start buying these directly from the suppliers themselves. And as a result, of course, he also visited the Gulf to seek out some natural pearls as well. So this trip resulted in a wonderful exchange of ideas and inspiration, and the Maharajas ended up commissioning Cartier to redesign many of their jewels and gems in more Western styles or in Indian styles with a bit of a Western twist. And in turn, Jacques Cartier also fell in love with many of the gemstones and the gemstone carving techniques that were used by the Indian gem cutters. So for example, an example of these are these wonderful carved Mughal emeralds. They were often found, you can see here, these kind of beautiful foliate engravings. And Jacques was responsible for actually acquiring some of these Mughal emeralds, bringing them back and mounting them in contemporary Cartier pieces. So this brooch, for example, was actually from 1923, made by Cartier in New York. But the emerald itself, that carved Mughal emerald in the center, probably dates to around the 17th or 18th century and would originally have belonged to a Maharaja. So looking as well, so Cartier Tutti Frutti, this was one of the major results from Jacques Cartier's trips to India.
But sorry, I wanted to touch upon, but we had discussed, remember, that the Indians didn't really like sapphires. So they were really not keen on sapphires, and that's why there was a lot of emphasis on emeralds.
Exactly, yeah. So traditionally, sapphires were considered to be unlucky. So this is why, in this necklace here, it's quite unusual. This is what, I mean that by Cartier kind of putting a bit of a spin on traditional Indian designs. Because this necklace here was, inspired by the Indian use of carved gems, the colors, but it includes sapphires, which traditionally would have been a complete no-no for their Indian clients. But this is a necklace. So this is the Hindu necklace by Cartier, which was commissioned by Daisy Fellows in 1936. So let's talk about Daisy Fellows first of all. So she's here on the left. She's photographed by Cecil Beaton wearing the necklace in 1937. And she came from the Singer sewing machine family. So she inherited a vast fortune. also a sense of style. So she was dubbed the world's most stylish woman by many of the leading magazines of the day in the 1920s and 30s. So from 1933 to 1935, she served as the Paris correspondent for Harper's Bazaar Paris, and even Coco Chanel herself was said to have been inspired by her style. And she, similar to the Duchess of Windsor, she was a client of many of the big jewellery houses and fashion houses of the time, so Cartier, Van Cleef and Boivin. So she commissioned Cartier to make this necklace for her in 1936. Quite interesting, it was the same as the Duchess of Windsor we heard, so she actually used pieces of her own, a necklace and a pair of bracelets, and asked them to use the stones which they added to create this wonderful necklace. And actually it would have been even, you know, it looked very similar to a traditional Indian necklace originally because it had a tie clasp at the back. It was actually her daughter who changed it for these two carved sapphires at the back later on. But interestingly, she only wore it once. Well, twice if you count this photograph, but also she wore it to a Venetian costume ball in 1951. But this was the start, or this is an example of the Tutti Frutti style, which we're going to look at a couple more examples of now, which is very much inspired by Jacques' trip to India. So this was sold by Sotheby's in 1991. It was a world record for any Tutti Frutti jewel by Cartier. It sold for $2.7 million. And this again was bought by Cartier for their heritage collection. So it can still be seen on exhibition today.
Sorry.
Yeah. So looking at the Tutti Frutti bracelet creations by Cartier. So these were made in the 1920s and 30s, and they incorporated these Mughal-style carved coloured gemstones, and you can see that they're cut in styles, you know, motifs such as leaves, berries, blossoms, and here a little bit more Indian style, no sapphires in there. But what Cartier did is, so they took these, Indian-inspired stones, and they blended them with the contemporary Art Deco styles of the day. So these, these diamond designs. Juxtaposed against these black enamel details. So it's this perfect marriage of East and West. And this particular example, touching on provenance again, so this belonged to Evelyn H. Lauder, and she was the daughter-in-law of Estée Lauder. She worked for the company as corporate vice president, and she was actually behind the Clinique line. The brains behind the Clinique line. So this was an auction record for any Cartier Tutti Frutti bracelet sold at auction, over $2 million. And this was obviously helped by provenance again.
And Sophie, this one also, we've talked about how it incorporates a bit of Art Deco style design, as well as the Tutti Frutti. And Tutti Frutti meant, what meant something fruit? What did it?
It means, in French, it means all fruits. So it's kind of, all fruits, so it's referring to the colour and the vibrancy of the pieces. But interestingly, the term Tutti Frutti wasn't used until the 1970s. So these weren't being created as Tutti Frutti jewels, but that is the name that has since been given to them.
And they're very iconically attributed to Cartier.
Yes, exactly. So we were so confident, these are highly collectible pieces. They're very rare. Each bracelet is unique. They weren't just made in bracelets, we had brooches made as well, for example, but the bracelets we're so confident in. If we go to the next slide, this is the latest one which we've sold. So this was the Cartier Tutti Frutti bracelet from 1930. And we actually sold it on the 28th of April this year. So in the middle of the worldwide global lockdown, we chose to offer this jewel for 600 to 800,000 in an online auction at Sotheby's, because such is our confidence in the collector market for Tutti Frutti bracelets, we knew that buyers would still be extremely interested. And it actually achieved 1.34 million, which was the world record at that time for any jewel sold in an online auction format. And as I said, each bracelet is completely unique in terms of style. So this one was interesting to us, just interesting to note. You can see just along the top of the bracelet, you can just see a little bit of enamel detailing, almost like a shadow. And that was something that we haven't seen before. So that was a very nice touch. And the rubies in this bracelet, for example, were actually particularly beautiful as well.
And like we said, Sophie, it's just they're so rare to come by. التوتي فروتي ده يعني مش هو كارتيه بدأ movement يعني they started the movement, and people, there are a lot of sort of fake tutti frutti now, and you see a lot of tutti frutti designed people are copying Cartier, and Cartier عملوا الديزاين ده after the travel and the trip to India. It was the trip to India that inspired this tutti frutti movement.
Yeah. So here's another slide for you, Mai.
Yes.
So talking about
I love this.
So the Egyptomania, so this was a trend that started in 1922, but Egyptian motifs had long been popular, ancient Egyptian motifs long been popular. But in 1922, we had the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb by Howard Carter, the British archaeologist. And this was kind of, I mean, it was influencing all kinds of areas. It influenced fashion, film, literature, and the jewelry houses also seized on this theme. One of them being Cartier again. So this Egyptian fan brooch was by Cartier London in 1923, and Egyptomania persisted pretty much for the decade. So this was at the start of some of their designs. So looking closely at this brooch, you can see it depicts an ancient green glazed faience bust of the goddess Sekhmet, who was depicted as a lioness. And you can see on the right, it's included here, it's in the London News in 1924 as the Tutankhamun influence in modern jewellery. And this indicates the range of pieces that Cartier produced that included ancient fragments within these contemporary jewels. And these had all been created just in a year and a half since Tutankhamun's tomb had been discovered. Yeah, sorry, Mike.
No, and it's just, I remember seeing this, I remember when we sold this, it's so beautiful when you see the marriage between how they were able to take like an ancient artifact, an historical artifact, and make it into a piece of jewelry. And it's really, it's so beautiful because already this carries so much history, the Sekhmet piece. This is 3,000 years of history, and then you add the Cartier facet. It's a whole different, interesting dimension.
And it's nice because it's still something that's being continued today. So Cartier, they did these lovely designs, but they weren't unique for it. And you know the brand Hemmeler, the jewelry house Hemmeler. So one of their last collections is called Hidden Treasures. And so Hemmeler today is run by a couple, Christian and Yasmin Hemmeler, and she is Egyptian, as you know.
Yes, she is.
And so they collected a whole load of ancient Egyptian artifacts, and again incorporated them with contemporary pieces. That was just 2 or 3 years ago, I think. So they're great examples today.
Yes, Yasmin and Christian had bought a lot of لغاية دلوقتي, a lot of these pieces are available in the European auction houses because there was a lot, Europeans when they were in Egypt أخذوا كتير من an ancient artifact, so you can still buy them. They incorporated them with the jewelry, which honestly it's so beautiful, and Cartier was one of the first people to do that, but you see it in other jewelry houses, and it's something, and like you said, the Egyptomania phase was what Paris was obsessed with, whether it be in fashion, whether it be in furniture design, everything was obsessed with this Egyptomania idea.
Exactly.
Sorry.
But it obviously didn't have to always include these ancient artifacts. So this is a lovely example by Le Cloche from 1925. And this just incorporated symbols and motifs from ancient Egypt, celebrating part of this Egyptomania phrase. But I wanted to include this close-up of the bracelet, so just so you can see the level of skill and craftsmanship that was in there. Because if you look, did we say it was a sphinx, Mai?
It's like a ram-headed sphinx.
Yeah, so that's motif, and you can see the emeralds and the rubies that are set there. So they're what we call calibre cuts. So they're cut and they're set for the shape of the sphinx itself, and they're also buff top. So they're buffed to actually have these lovely smooth finishings. And this was Le Cloche really showing off their craftsmanship and the level of detail. It takes a really exceptional piece of jewelry to have this level of focus, have this level of time and skill that's needed to produce this effect. And hopefully you can see it in some detail there.
I wish, I was in Geneva when we sold this, and if you could, if you could flip the bracelet, and you can see even from the back the way it was done, perfect, impeccable. Like الماندوفر بتاع عمول البريسلت ده, I don't think we have these techniques were just so avant-garde for 1925, and it was so light, it was so supple, and still very much obsessed with this Egyptomania, Egyptian revival. theme.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. That's one of the first pieces of advice I had when I started working in jewelry by my brother-in-law. He was like, if you want to see a good piece of jewelry, check the back. And it's true. If you have, the time and the skill that's needed to create exceptional pieces, they would have put in the effort, and the back is as beautiful as the front. And they bracelets such as this, you can run it over your hand, they're like silk.
Absolutely, exactly like silk. حرير على دراعك. And then this is more Egypt.
And this is more Egypt from the Egypt theme.
I think Asma Hanim, a lot of the people, you guys all got to see this necklace when it came to Abu Dhabi and Dubai for the
I saw it in Dubai when Van Cleef exhibition.
It's beautiful. I was just speaking to someone, and I think one of the highlights of my life, أهم حتة في حياتي دلوقتي, I got to try it on and take a picture wearing it when we were selling it. وكان من أسعد أيام حياتي. I was so happy wearing Nazli's necklace. I don't think you can be happier than that.
I'm jealous. That would have been brilliant.
Yes.
So yes, using this wonderful necklace to look at the fifth and final theme, which are the jewelry houses. So today we know, and we're very well aware of the famous names, so Cartier, Van Cleef, Boucheron, and these houses have long histories and have been often the go-to stop for unique commissions such as this. So as Maya was saying, this necklace formerly from the collection of Queen Nazli, former Queen Mother of Egypt. And it was designed by Van Cleef in 1939 for Queen Nazli, for her daughter Princess, correct my pronunciation, Maya, if I get this wrong, Princess Fawzia's
Yes.
wedding to the Crown Prince of Iran. So Van Cleef had been asked to provide all of the wedding jewels in record time. And so for the bride, they made a collarette, 2 pairs of earrings and a tiara. And Queen Nazli took the opportunity to commission a more lavish parure for herself at the same time. So she's pictured, you can see here, she also had a tiara commissioned, and that had a total of about 292 carats of diamonds, and could also be worn as a necklace. This is quite a typical feature of tiara. You could detach the diamond piece from the frame and just flip it to be worn on the neck as well. But the necklace was a masterpiece. So it was a sunburst design. It was designed for formal occasions in the bib style, so to be worn high on the neck. And it was set with 673 diamonds. You can see, these 3 rivières that go to this sunburst design at the center, and then the 4 rivières set below this. But Queen Nazli herself, she had a wonderful jewelry collection, which was helped by a rather volatile relationship with her husband, King Fuad. So she was very independent, very hot-headed lady, and they would frequently argue. And apparently King Fuad would buy her some wonderful pieces of jewelry in efforts to kind of calm her down. So apparently each morning her ladies-in-waiting kind of discreetly check what she was wearing. If she had a new rather fabulous bracelet, for example, they knew that a rather large argument had probably happened the night before. Unfortunately, the end of her life ended somewhat sadly. So after King Fuad's death, she moved to California with her youngest daughter, who had married a Coptic Christian. King Farouk, her son, was furious, and he stripped them of their titles, and they ended up in financial problems, and actually had to sell their jewelry in order to get some money. So this was sold by Sotheby's, and it was bought by Van Cleef for the Heritage Collection. And as we just discussed, it was most recently, I think it was October last year, it was on view at the Dubai Opera House Van Cleef Boutique as part of the Treasures and Legends exhibition.
And everyone always asks, where are Fawzia's jewels? Because no one knows actually where are Fawzia's jewels until now. And when you see all the pictures of the story, when the wedding of Fawzia, all her sisters, everyone had these most beautiful necklaces. And also part of the Van Cleef exhibition, المعرض اللي كان بتاع Van Cleef اللي كان في دبي, there was also the jewels of Princess it wasn't Fathiya, it was one of Fawzia and her others, Fahima, I'm not sure, that Van Cleef had also bought back, which was with the emeralds, which was sold by Christie's, it wasn't sold by us.
Oh, that's wonderful. So nice to be given the chance to see these again, that's the thing. So also some of the best loved designs and collections can owe their origins and popularity to great jewelry collectors. So some of you, or most of you, are probably very familiar with the zip necklace design by Van Cleef, which has become one of their most sought after creations. And the idea, sorry. So the idea for this actually goes back to about 1938, and it's thanks to the Duchess of Windsor again, we can see here on the right. She was a great client of Van Cleef, and she suggested to René Poussin, who was Van Cleef's artistic director, that a great idea for a piece of jewelry was to base it on the zip fastener. And the zip fastener has started being used at the end of the 19th century in America pretty unglamorously. It was on boots and aviator jackets, but it was the Duchess of Windsor that said, let's make it into a piece of jewelry. And it took them, obviously the Second World War then happened in Europe, and because of the level of skill that was needed to create these, I think it's still about 700 or 800 hours to create the necklace. The first one didn't appear until the 1950s, and this was in diamonds and platinum in 1950. And actually going back to Princess Fazia, she was actually one of the first clients in 1952 to wear the new zip necklace, and she had one made in yellow gold with rubies and diamonds with matching earrings. And very few were created in the 1950s, hence the great result for this one that we saw with a pair of earrings at Sotheby's Geneva in 2018. And it's worth noting as well that they actually the necklace transforms into a bracelet as well. So they're a really wonderful, versatile piece of jewelry as well.
Van Cleef still makes this, but there's also the element of the ancient way of the older way of making it versus the new way of making it. And I think collectors, الناس المقتنعين of Van Cleef, really prefer to buy the older versions than the new versions. And I don't know why, but Sophie, you might. Is there?
It's a rarity. There were very few made in the 1950s. It took time. So yeah, the 1950s, the earlier ones are the ones that are most collectible. We just don't.
We can't find them.
Make however many they want today, but these are limited, obviously, in number.
And that's why we see this amazing price from 50,000 to 65,000 to achieve 500,000.
Yeah, but still great value compared to retail.
Absolutely, much cheaper. Always come to auction.
Yeah. And so moving on, so other recognizable collections, again, probably one that you're all very familiar with, is Bulgari's Serpenti design. It's been reimagined in many forms. The snake itself has been used as an enduring motif in jewelry for a very long time. But Bulgari's Serpenti was first created by them in 1940 or the 1940s. But it's really thanks to this lady, Elizabeth Taylor, the actress, that the Serpenti and even Bulgari themselves can thank for their reputation. So at this time in the 1960s, Bulgari was much smaller than we know it today. It had no international stores except for their store in Rome. And their store in Rome is one that Elizabeth Taylor took a great fancy to. So this picture was taken in 1962. You can see that she's wearing her Bulgari bracelet watch on her left wrist. And so she was filming Cleopatra in Rome alongside the actor Richard Burton, who she went on to marry for the first time a couple of years later. And it was during filming that Elizabeth and Richard fell in love, and they began their love affair, and they would start paying these visits to Bulgari, where Elizabeth and Richard would start looking at these wonderful jewels and purchasing quite a few. They would often enter and exit the store by a side door, so to avoid media attention. And Richard quipped at the time that the only Italian word that Liz knows is Bulgari. But it's unclear whether the Bulgari bracelet that she's wearing was actually bought by Richard for her. It could have been bought by her husband at the time, who also bought from Bulgari for her, or she could have bought it for herself. You know, her contract for Cleopatra, it was worth $1 million, which was the highest ever paid to an actress at that time. But it was really, thanks to this image, thanks to her, that it's kind of been elevated to the iconic status that we know it today.
And we still see the Serpenti, لسه لغاية دلوقتي the Serpenti bracelet. Bulgari keeps reinterpreting it. There are the vintage Bulgari ones. Everyone loves them. It's honestly so iconic to Bulgari and so unique to Bulgari. Just like every house, like Cartier has the Tutti Frutti, Bulgari has the Serpenti.
Exactly. It's still, I would say that a Bulgari Serpenti is just one of the staples of a jewelry collection.
Exactly. So if I'm coming to amass a jewelry collection of the greatest of the great, I'd have to find a Cartier Tutti Frutti, a Bulgari Serpenti, and a zip necklace from Van Cleef.
Exactly. We'll find them. Don't worry. We'll find them.
If you guys, if anyone wants them, we can find them for you guys.
Wonderful. So,
أحسن فكرة مي. The best idea.
The best. I want to find for you guys. Just come to us. Sophie and I are ready to find them.
Thank you.
So this is the last slide here, so it's opening up for any questions, but it's also using the opportunity because I'm always very aware that we talk about, you know, these pieces that sell, you know, $36 million pearls, $4 million diamond necklaces, but we actually, from tomorrow, so we've held, you know, online auctions, you know, even before lockdown, but lockdown has actually accelerated the online auctions, which have been performing really well. So from tomorrow, 2nd of September, we're actually launching the weekly edit, Fine Jewelry Sales, and we're kickstarting with our first sale in Geneva. And you can, you know, pick up many pieces of jewelry that don't have these hefty price tags. So we've got everything in the auction, you know, from Cartier Love and Trinity rings, from just 400 Swiss francs, up to, you know, a Graf ruby and diamond necklace, which is 120 to 180,000. But again, brilliant price compared to retail. So yeah, that's launching tomorrow, which we're very excited about.
Thank you, Sophie. It's a beautiful demonstration, and it's really, as we said, treasure to see these things. But which I read about, she sell it in auction, Mrs. Simpson. It's donated for pastor organization. Some of them they sell, they donate it for some organization.
Yeah, exactly. So the proceeds can be dedicated to a charity, and often, you know, collectors will leave that in their will. So they will stipulate that they want their donations, the collections sold and the proceeds donated to a charity of their choosing. I will state that. Yeah.
I think she donated for the pastors organization institute. I think for appreciate France. They live there with the King Edward.
Yeah, for the first time. I've actually got the original catalogue here, so I might just check that. It's not online anymore, sadly, Asma. So yes, so sold for the benefit of the Pastel Institute. So you can see this is like headline. Headline title,
and I think it's good cause also. And also I like the story about Elizabeth Taylor when she do her movie about Cleopatra. I think Isis in Rome. That's why she connect with Bulgari. It's that's why sometimes it's nice the connect coming when you are traveling or with the jewelry and.
It's not a bad way to spend your days filming, and then you have breaks, so you just go and visit Bulgari, buy some jewelry, go back and start filming again. A nice day.
But it's not only that, Ahna, we see it now, like with people traveling to India to see Bhagat, with people going to Paris and they want to see Jar. A lot of people are now traveling so they can go to these unique jewelers, and people going to Munich for Hammerly. It's something now that we're seeing all the time when it comes to these amazing new jewelry houses that weren't there at the 19th centuries but are very much present now.
Yeah. I think now we open the question. There is a question, I think, from Amal. Amal, تفضلي تدوسي.
مرحبا أسماء.
يا مرحبا فيك أمل، حياك الله.
يعيشك مرحبا كلكم. Thank you so much for this beautiful moment of not luxury but much more dream, and the story behind all these jewels and of course all these famous houses. And now you just mentioned about even the small house, but maybe confidential, the house of Jar. My two questions, very short. Does it happen that when it's about the auctions that this piece is sold, and that the person who's buying it, of course, will not would say not to mention the price? So you will sell it, but not mention the price, and of course not the name. The second question is, how about now that at that time and still these iconic figures, royal figures, the stars, cinema stars, and all these, full of beauty representing these jewels. How about now that we have not placed but different type of maybe
I think
الصوت أمال عيدي السؤال.
Shall I start answering the first question?
Okay,
Yes,
I think
yes.
you are, yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Let me start answering the first question about so in an auction format, we're very transparent about the prices all the time. So we will always say what it's sold for. The buyers, though, actually remain confidential, of course. Every now and then you get a buyer that wants to be quite open about the fact that they've bought a piece. So, for example, Lawrence Graff, you know, of Graff Diamonds, he's very open about the big diamonds and the big gems that he buys at auction. It adds to his reputation and his personal brand. So if the buyer wants to be publicised, then we will do so. Otherwise, it remains completely confidential. The price in the auction format we always publicise because we're very proud of the fact that auction is a very transparent way of buying and selling jewellery. People look to auctions as a kind of market benchmark. They want to know how much they should be paying for a certain piece in an auction based on recent market results. It's different though. Sotheby's also offer, we have a private sales arm as well. So if people would rather buy behind the scenes and be a bit more discreet about the price and what they're paying, then we can certainly offer that as an option as well. Your second question, I didn't hear all of it, but I think I kind of knew the angle you were saying, and I agree with you. I think that we had these style icons before that were kind of pioneers in the way. But we've had the rise of the stylist more recently. So I think stars nowadays are quite often told what to wear on the red carpet as opposed to choosing it for themselves.
I think there is a question from Hanadi Saleh. تفضلي لأخت هنادي.
Hello, hi Sophie. Hello,
Hi,
nice to see
hello.
you again. Sophie, we were talking about the provenance, and I was asking on the chat to explain the meaning of provenance because the importance of the heritage from famous family add to the value of the jewelry. So, if we can elaborate a little bit more, not a lot, in order to give just an idea about the auction, how it happens. Thank you.
Sure. So provenance, when we're talking about jewellery, so with the majority of pieces of jewellery that come to auction, we don't know or we don't publicise who owns them. And obviously if pieces are inherited and they're offered up for auction, the families have lost track. Where was it bought? Who was it originally owned by? We don't know this information. Sometimes we do, and if it's a famous person, if it's a famous collector, a member of royalty, then this history, it just adds, a story, it adds to the history of the piece. And because we don't come across this very often, it adds to the rarity. And that is why it adds so much to the value. So if we think, for example, that we knew that pearl and diamond pendant was owned by Marie Antoinette, it just casts like an aura of romance. You're looking at it thinking this was worn by the last Queen of France and it has survived until now. This is from the 18th century and it has survived until 2020. It's incredible. So I think it's the romance and just the history that really adds to that.
مي بغيت لو ممكن تشرحين حق واحد أول مرة يروح يحضر الأوكشن عشان خصوصاً المجوهرات. المجوهرات هل بيكون في شهادات موجودة
فاحنا usually in non-COVID situations we have jewelry sales in Paris, we have jewelry sales in London, في Geneva, New York وهونغ كونغ. والحاجات دي عادة we have them come travel to Dubai, بيجوا دبي. واحنا we love having inshallah COVID will be over, we'll be having things coming to Dubai and we would love to have كل حد يجي يزورنا. And if anyone would like to share their email with Sophie or myself, we'll make sure when the Dubai exhibition starts again to invite you to our exhibitions to come see the jewelry. عادة when we're selling pieces, we sell a lot of the signed pieces. زي ما Sophie قالت, this Cartier piece which you can get at retail, we include these at auction, but we also include lots of diamonds that are certified, diamonds that are uncertified. I think pieces that are from the 1920s, pieces that are from the 1950s, and pieces that ممكن يكونوا بتاع بولغاري وممكن ما يكونوش بتاع بولغاري. I think الناس كلها بتخاف, there's a bit of fear when it comes to the auction. but it's very transparent and it's very accessible. يعني Sophie's always happy to look at anyone's jewelry, to provide estimates. Sophie's always happy to talk to you about why is this yellow diamond important? Why did we price this yellow diamond like this? And usually when we're pricing, احنا لازم على طول نكون مع الماركت. We have to be in tune مع السوق ماشي ازاي. فزي ما تشوفي هنا like these love bracelets we sell them a lot cheaper than retail. يعني عشان احنا you add the factor of the cachet ان هو Cartier أو Van Cleef وكده, بس everything is always available and we sell this all the time and we love having people over. يعني احنا we love having people come to see the jewelry. We love explaining the jewelry. We're very excited for 2021 when things start going back to normal to have people coming and seeing the jewels that we sell.
Also يعني when the people when they go to buy from the auction how they can what I mean, sometimes I've been many times in Geneva and this for jewelry, to see the jewelry what's called it exhibition for the auction. It's the price, nobody know the price, it start from something after go, as you said today, Sophie explained, sometimes the family, the heritage, and the province for the people. That's why maybe they add on the price. That's why thank you today, at least you explained to us. Sometimes it's the heritage and the family province, it's added the price for the jewelry or for...
Definitely, and then we're always, there are a lot of things that we can guide you with. يعني at one point the market was very hot, and Sophie correct me if I'm wrong, for cashmere sapphires. كل حد كان عايز cashmere sapphire, فالأسعار بتطلع. وبعدين it subsides. For everything, it just really depends on the current هوجة. يعني عارف, there was an obsession with diamonds that are D flawless type 2A, and then the prices go up, and then the prices are now acclimated. So you just have to always ask Sophie, you can ask me, you can ask all of the jewelry specialists, and we can walk you through everything step by step.
Yeah.
If you put your email in today in the chat, please.
I'm gonna put it my email and Sophie's email for everyone.
Yes. نهى, مرحبا نهى تفضلي, عندك سؤال.
اهلا وسهلا. ازيك يا مي؟
ازيك يا نهى؟
Hello. I want to ask a question about the auction. The jewelry, when we go to the auction, when we say it's antique jewelry, it begins from 50 years, 100 years. What is the minimum or the beginning?
There's no definite age range, but we typically mean about 100 years and more.
100 years. Huh?
Yeah.
And if in the auction there is an auction and there is some of the jewelry, it's not sold. So you can make something. People can go on and ask. We can buy this after the auction or no? If it's not.
No, it's possible. I mean, what we can do is if the pieces haven't sold and you're interested in buying the piece still, we can make an offer to the seller after the auction. But we typically say it has to be at the low estimate. It can't be lower than that. But we can do that. We can always suggest to the seller, they have a private offer and do an after sale after the auction.
Thank you. Thank you.
There is a question from Rana. تفضلي يا رنا. يا مرحبا رنا.
مساء الخير. سوري أسمع من قبل الصوت ما كان طالع عندي. مي العقد اللولو تبع جاكلين كندي خلاني أفكر بشيء إنه يعني إذا ما له أي قيمة مادية قلتي مجرد بلاستيك وفقط لأني جاكلين كندي لبسته. طيب كيف تتأكدوا إنه هلا أنا في عندي قطعة بقول لك هي كانت للرئيس الفلاني؟ كيف بيتم التأكد من مرجعية هالقطعة لا تثمن بهالطريقة الغير منطقية؟
Sophie, the question is about the Jackie O necklace, how we can make sure and certain that this was Jackie O and not anyone else. And I can answer this. We had a sale only of Jackie O's property. يعني it was an estate sale. فهي كانت حاجات كلها Jackie O. يعني احنا we sold the whole estate of Jackie O. فده كان حاجاتها من بيتها. ف there's no way we can't يعني this is the reason we say that it's from the Jackie O family.
اوكي بس هلا اذا اجتكم قطعه
أوكي.
انا جبت لك قطعه وقلت لك كانت لشخصيه مهمه، في مجال للتاكد ولا
لا we always if a piece comes to us احنا and we always have to do double checks. We have to make sure, we have to research. There are books, there are things like that, but we always have to double check. You know, there's no way. If for example I come and I tell you this piece used to belong للملكة يعني one of the Egyptian royals, you have to double check, you have to do your research. And Sophie will agree with me. It's not. We see a lot of examples where it's we sell a lot of things. We have a section called noble jewels. We sell jewels from royal families, but we always have to double check which royal family, which nobility. You know, there has to be some sort of evidence. ما ينفعش كده. It can't be haphazard that we say, oh, we are just. Or in the case, like for example, you want to sell a piece and by history you used to buy from a certain jeweler. We can write in the catalog note, this family used to acquire the jewelry from XYZ, but we can't say, this is from XYZ. Am I right, Sophie, or is there something?
Yes.
100%, completely agree with you, yeah.
There's a question from Fatina Sarraj. تفضلي فاتنة.
مساء الخير جميعا واسف اني ورا الكاميرا اليوم. My question is, at any point in Sotheby's history, how many pieces you had at one time? The second one, do you ever lend your jewelry to celebrities? And thank you so much.
Wow. So in terms of the amount of jewelry you've had at one time, that's a very difficult question because we have sales throughout the year, as Maya was saying. So we've got our major, magnificent jewel sales, which take place in New York, Hong Kong, and Geneva. And then we have our smaller fine jewelry sales that take place in Milan, in London, and also in Hong Kong, Geneva. So we have sales all the time. Very, very difficult to keep an exact idea of the number of pieces that we have. But safe to say that our safes are absolutely full to the brim of wonderful jewels. We're very, very lucky to work there and have access to these pieces all of the time. In terms of lending them, unfortunately, we don't, because for auction, obviously, until they're sold to the buyer, they belong to other people. They belong to our clients. So we're just keeping them for safekeeping, if you like, before we offer them full sale. They're never ours. They're never owned by Sotheby's. They're always owned by sellers until they're bought by somebody else, and then we obviously have to send it to the buyer. So unfortunately not. But the specialists are always able to try on pieces themselves in the office, which is a very fun perk of the job. And obviously, if clients are interested to see, jewelry should be seen worn. So often, we have the catalogs, we have the jewelry photographed, and clients want to know what a piece looks like when it's being worn. So we send photos and can take photos of that, which is a lovely side to our job.
Thank you so
but
much.
obviously, if you come to one of the exhibitions in Dubai, the next one that we have, of course you can try on the jewelry there. That goes without saying.
في أسئلة من حدا خافني ما أشوف الأسامي. في حد أظني على الشات ما عرفت أقرأ الاسم. في سؤال تفضلي. في حدا كان حاط إنه بيسأل عنده مداخلة. اي تفضلي سليمان. سوري ما شفت اسمك سليمان، تسمحي لي.
لا انا حبيت اعرف. Yes, Sophie, thank you for both of you for the early explanation we had. I just wanted to explore a little bit today. I had the morning lecture about the valuation, but it's a land valuation, so you don't know the jewelry. Now we're moving on. I wanted to explore more on the percentage of difference between the natural pear and the custom pear, the Japanese made pear. How many differences? Is it 20%, 30% less, or how much is it comparing with the market actually?
It's a really good question. There's a huge difference. Interestingly, not so much in the past. So when cultured pearls were first introduced in the market in the early 20th century by Mikimoto, as you said, the Japanese pioneered the way of culturing pearls for the commercial market. And this actually impacted the value of natural pearls. They were extremely valuable and rare before then, and their value plummeted because obviously people started buying these cultured pearls, which looked pretty much exactly the same instead. But then the market has become flooded with them. There was a very good exhibition in the Victoria and Albert Museum. I think it was about 10 years ago. It was a pearls exhibition, and it just shows the number of cultured pearls that are produced every single day. And so therefore natural pearls, they've soared again in terms of value because people appreciate their rarity. As we were saying earlier on, it's so hard to find good quality natural pearls, let alone one of them, let alone tens of them to form a necklace. And when you've got that, a row of 39 natural pearls measuring the same kind of dimensions or graduated in size, if you compare that to a cultured pearl necklace that could be made so easily, and there's so many of them on the market, it's just two ends of the scale now. Natural pearls are just considered far more valuable.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, May, for really today we enjoy the beautiful presentation. مشكورة جدا مي على دائما لقاءاتك الجميلة ومع صوفي، ودائما تمتعينا بثقافتك العالية في كل المجالات، يعني تبهرينا في صالون الملتقى الأدبي. يعني أنت تحديتينا يعني في ثقافتك وما شاء الله عليك وعطائك الجميل جدا وحبك لذات المعنى، يعني ذات الثقافة، لذات الفكر، يعني مبين من طريقتك في الحوار وطريقتك بالهذا أكثر ما أن الواحد في مجال عمله، بس أنت الحب للثقافة والحب لما وراء المعلومة هاي جدا مهم يعني. وأتصور اليوم كثير استفدنا من العرض الجميل، المجوهرات اللي دائما تزين صدور النساء، وفي نفس الوقت صراعات الدول كثير في أفريقيا وغيرها على هالمناجم تحمل وجهين، وجه الجمال ووجه الإنسانية الجانب الثاني، وأنتم دائما تظهرون الجمال بطريقة عرضكم وتاريخ القطعة. يعني مهم جدا الإنسان إنه يحتفظ بقطعة أو يتزين بقطعة تكون لها تاريخ ولها أصول وجذور، وهاي تعطي معنى أن الإنسانية مهمة جدا، الإنسان مهم جدا. وهذا مثل على جاكلين كندي البيرل اللي انباع، يعني قيمة الإنسان أقوى من القيمة الجوهرة يعني. وهذا يشجع الإنسان دائما يكون معطاء في الحياة ويكون له اسم يحفر اسمه يعني. وكل إنسان يتعب في الحياة ويحفر اسمه أكيد في الأخير بيحصل تقدير بأي وجهة في أي مجال يعني. شكرا صوفي. Thank you Sophie too much for everything, to accept our invitation and to be with us today. It's a beautiful night and a beautiful talk. Thank you for everybody. Thank you May. Thank you for all our guests. شكرا حرم سفير المملكة العربية السعودية وحرم سفير دائما أختنا وعزتنا سارة والخوات جميعا كلهم الحضور جميعا، وسامحوني إذا قصر في حق إنسان، بس كلكم أهلا وسهلا فيكم. إن شاء الله نلتقي الأسبوع الجاي مع محاضرة ثانية في مجال الأدب مع الأديبة البرازيلية مارتا. وأهلا وسهلا فيكم وشرفتونا.
Thank you Asma Hanem. On behalf of Sophie, myself and Sotheby's, we really can't thank you enough. Yani your efforts, your support, your ability to bring in everyone and for us to all share this joy and passion for culture, art and jewelry. And we really can't wait for life to go back to normal so we can meet everyone in الملتقى in Abu Dhabi and come and have a special visit to see you all. And بجد thank you so much for your enthusiasm and thank you so much for allowing us to be on this platform. وكلامك يعني زي العسل بجد، يعني مش قادرة أقول أكتر من كده.
لا إن شاء الله ننتظر المحاضرة الثانية، فكرة جديدة.
نفكر في حاجة جديدة. معاكم.
يا مرحبا.
أهلا وسهلا.
يا مرحبا. Thank you Sophie. It's really Sophie. We need with you to talk maybe 1,000 of hours to understand all this about all this history of the jewelry. It's very important for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
شكرا جميعا.
Thank you.
مرحبا فيكم، أهلا وسهلا.